What we done started. Look at what we done started. This the people party. Peace and love, party people. This is Talib Kweli. This is The People's Party, the world's best podcast. We have a good time at this podcast. Shout out to my UPROXX crew and staff that helps us and holds us down. Shout out to the Luminary family. And shout out to my lovely and talented and funny and thoughtful and thought-provoking co-host, Jasmin Leigh, in the place to be. What's up, Jasmin? How you feeling?
Good evening. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Is that how you feel like you dressed?
This. You know what? I just can't stop shaking my head. So, hi, from me and my Bob. How are you doing this morning?
Well, you jumped in right with the funny stuff. Today's episode, we are going into the world of comedy.
Oh, yeah.
That is your world. Our guest today is hilarious. He is an exemplary stand-up comedian. He is pointed. He is fearless. He is Emmy nominated. He got all types of accolades. He's a writer. He's an actor. And this man is uncancelable, like myself.
Yes.
Like myself. This man is willing to push the line, and we cherish him for that. He is a master at roasting, which is, you know, when I first met you, was through the whole roasting thing.
Yes.
He has made headlines roasting some iconic figures, some loved, some hated. People like Donald Trump, Charlie Sheen, Roseanne Barr, just to name a few. You have seen
hated?
him. Some people love these people. Some people hate him. I don't know. You've seen him on Premium Blend, Comedy Bang, Garfunkel and Oates, Last Comic Standing, Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, which he also served as a writer on that show. He has specials, he has albums, and I think the art of the comedy album is a lost art, and I appreciate when comedians put out great comedy albums like Shakespeare, Caligula, Thoughts and Prayers, Fire and Maternity Ward. Actually, the last two were more specials on Netflix. Each one of them feels vital and essential and funny. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Anthony Jeselnik and the place to be.
Yes. AJ.
Yeah. Yes. I like that shirt. Thank you. That makes me feel like I'm at home. Brooklyn business on that shirt.
And the Brooklyn on your shoulder.
Oh, that's right. I got my Nets gear on.
Yeah, you do.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a nice sweatshirt.
This is from when the Nets had me perform at halftime last year.
No.
Which is my first time performing in a basketball stadium. It's the first time I performed with choreography because they had the Nets dancers do a routine to my song, which was amazing.
To get by?
Yeah, to get by.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. I felt like a superstar.
That's great.
You are a superstar.
You know, sometimes I get to feel like one. But it's not about me today. It's about Mr. Anthony Jeselnik. How you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for doing this show. My world overlaps with comedians a lot, so I'm glad that we're able to dive into music and comedy on the show. But Jasmin, I met her through the wonderful comedian Jeff Ross, who we're good friends with.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
I feel like we have a lot in common and a lot to talk about.
Oh, it's a compliment already.
Yes, sir. So let's start from the beginning. You grew up in the Pittsburgh area, Upper St. Clair to be exact, correct? Mm-hmm. Pittsburgh is known for being a place where they describe it as a brain drain. People are born there and people leave there. And I've heard from people in Pittsburgh that sometimes people feel like people don't come back to the city enough. Is this something that you agree with?
Yeah, I think a lot of young people leave the city to go. I mean, I certainly left to go to college in New Orleans, moved to LA. Remember when I moved to LA, they had ads they would run on TV that were like paid for by Pittsburgh, telling young people not to move to LA because there's no earthquakes in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Like they were that desperate to keep the young people there. But a lot of my friends I went to high school with have moved back since. So maybe it's changing.
Are you a fan of Mac Miller at all?
Oh, yeah. Huge Mac Miller fan.
Huge shout out to Mac Miller. He's on my new album, Liberation 2, that I'm doing with Madlib.
Oh, wow.
But shout out to Wiz Khalifa, who we just had on the show, and Mac Miller and the family of Mac Miller, and just Siri X and Paradise Architect and Kendra Ross and all my Pittsburgh people.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So I'm the second oldest of 7, and I can definitely say every single person in my family is funnier and probably funnier than me. You're the oldest of 5, so I want to know, how was it being the oldest sibling and developing your comedy? And are your siblings and your parents funny as well?
No one in my family is funny. No one. Like, it was just me. And I wasn't the normal oldest brother. I was protective, but it was 5 kids in 7 years. We got on each other's nerves more than anything else. And now we're closer that we're older. But at the time, I was kind of doing my own thing. I was a weirdo as a kid.
So you're not the role model?
No. And I think they wanted me to be, and that wasn't going to happen.
Oh, so how did you develop the idea of playing a villain in your act? And where does your need to push the audience come from?
I think if I'm going to be, I always thought if I was going to be a comedian, I had to push the audience. That was the only way it seemed fun to me. I didn't want to be an entertainer. I wanted to be an artist and challenge people. And when I started doing comedy, the audience kind of made me into a villain. When I was, starting out 20 years ago now, I looked much different, a little like a pretty boy, and the audience hated me right away.
Right.
They just didn't like me, and I thought, that's interesting. Let's go with that, and it's fun to play the villain. When you watch a movie, the villain's like kind of the fun role, and I enjoy that.
AV Club, I was reading just now, before you walked in, called you the satanic prince of stand-up. I think that's fucking hilarious.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I took it as a huge compliment. When I was starting out, I was looking for things that would influence me and, kind of role models, not just people, but also things in literature. And there's a comic book called Lucifer. It was a spinoff of The Sandman. It was like a DC comic, and Lucifer was the devil, and he was just this guy who just figured everything out, was one step ahead of everyone. And I thought if I could do that as stand-up, it would be fun.
Now, you have a great love for reading, and so do I. My parents are both professors. My mother is a professor of literature. You went to Tulane, and while you were at Tulane, you expressed the desire to write the great American novel. So in your estimation, what are the contenders for the greatest American novel?
I almost think that's not a boring conversation, but who cares? You want something, a great American novel, you think of something that's for everyone, for the entire country. And I don't know what that would be. Okay. I've heard people say, Moby Dick could be the great American novel, Grapes of Wrath, but that's not as interesting. I like more very contemporary stuff. Like the best book I read all year. Have you read The Trees by Percival Everett?
I haven't. I don't read as much as I used to. I own a bookstore called Incura Books, and I used to read a lot before I had a career, but I don't read nearly as much. So that's one of the interesting things about your journey is I know that I've read or heard you say that, you challenge yourself to read everything new that comes out. And I think that's very interesting.
I do it because I want to be writing all the time, and I feel like you have to read to be writing, and it's meditative for me. I'm on the road. The healthiest thing I can do is get through a book that weekend. So that helps me survive on the road. Yeah,
I find that anything is a muscle. Part of the reason I don't read as much is because I've fallen out of the habit of reading, and it's like I want to take the time to redevelop that muscle, get back in the habit of reading. Do you feel like that your reading muscle is super developed?
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah, it is. It's the habit.
Yes, indeed. Now, you also worked at a bookstore at Borders. I worked at a bookstore. I ended up buying the bookstore I worked at. Well, actually, I worked at Shakespeare & Company Booksellers in Greenwich Village first. And I worked at a Black-owned bookstore, Incura Books, in Brooklyn. And myself and Yassine Bey ended up, it's funny, when you said the thing about the entertainer, I'm not an entertainer. Yassine on this show said, we have been miscast as entertainers, which I think he agrees with you on that. But what are some of the funny experiences that you had working at a bookstore?
Oh, I mean, I was only there for 3 months before they fired me. And it was a Borders Books and Music. It was a very corporate bookstore. Yeah. And my job was mostly wrangling homeless people. Homeless people would come in, and Borders allowed them to come in and read and hang out. And when they didn't smell great or they started bothering people, I had to deal with that. So it was an education. And then they got rid of me.
When I worked at Shakespeare & Company, my job was coat check and bag check. My first job before I moved up in the company. Working at that place, I got a lesson in learning how to confront my ingrained societal homophobia. Because now I'm working in Greenwich Village and guys are coming in and hitting on me. And I had to deal with it. I'm at first I felt very uncomfortable about this because I grew up in a neighborhood where people just didn't do that. And I had to question myself as a young man. Well, why is it that I feel so uncomfortable? So I appreciate that job for that because it made me question some of my own morality.
Yeah, you learned how to take a compliment.
Yeah. Well, what's the problem? So I want to talk about some of your early comedic influences and get your takes on some of these individuals. Sure. Starting with Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright is somebody who my father used to be really into watching stand-up when I was a kid. When stand-up, from my perspective, my first time seeing stand-up was shows on Fox or NBC or early, comic shows where Stephen Wright was really, really popular in the 80s. Yeah. And being sort of blown away by the chances he was taking on stage. And then he came back into my life doing the voice in Reservoir Dogs and the guy on the couch in Half Baked. So talk to me about how Stephen Wright has influenced you.
I just loved stand-up comedy, and I'd watch anyone. I didn't care, male, female. It didn't matter to me at all. I just liked watching stand-up. And Stephen Wright, I blew them all out of the water as far as I was concerned, because his jokes, there was no like basis in reality. So he really could do anything. He wasn't just talking about his wife or his family. And the joke was always like, how did he think of that? It just blew me away. And you would hear the joke a million times, and it was always funny. That I just thought, this guy's different from everyone else. Whenever he came on the screen, I was just laser focused in the way I wasn't with other comedians. But a guy like Stephen Wright, Rodney Dangerfield, Mitch Hedberg, I love that. Just how did he think of it sort of thing that I always try to go for in my jokes.
Mitch Hedberg is like a revelation. It's like you getting into comedy, there's the superstars of comedy. And then if you're really into it, you start looking at, okay, you see the superstars who get the big budget movies. And then you see, okay, here are the workhorses and the guys who are going to kill at a club no matter what. And then you say, well, where are these guys getting influenced by? And you hear, Mitch Hedberg and Rodney Dangerfield and these guys. And Mitch Hedberg in particular, you have not been shy about speaking on how much he's influenced your particular style. And I've heard you in interviews talk about how when you first saw him, you thought that was something that was unique to him, but then you saw other comics trying it, and then you tried your hand. So what is it about the efficiency of his style that's so liberating?
Just not having a basis in reality. So many comics want to get personal. I think a lot of artists want to get personal. And when you take that away and you're like, I'm not getting personal at all, you really can't talk about anything. It's the difference between reading a memoir and reading science fiction. There's a lot more that's possible in the world of science fiction. And Mitch Hedberg kind of attacked that.
One of my favorite episodes of the Louis C.K. show that he had on FX was Stephen Wright. He does a set at the Comedy Cellar, and Stephen Wright is like, you got to go out there, and you know what I'm saying, like, and the Comedy Cellar is like holy grail for a lot of stand-ups. There's a lot of comedy clubs all through the country, right, that are like, you have to do this club. But in particular, what is it that's unique about the Comedy Cellar and that experience in New York that sort of elevates its profile in the world of stand-up?
I think a big part of it is the room itself. I'm sure you've been to the Comedy Cellar. It's in the basement, low ceiling, brick walls. The laughter really echoes. It really hits, and it's almost like a cathedral to stand up. And then you have the upstairs room, and a lot of that comes from Noam, the owner of the Cellar, Esty, who books it. The kind of the atmosphere they create. That getting there, you wanted to get there early. You wanted to sit and talk to your friends at the comics table. In between sets, you would hang out up there, and that was just as creatively fulfilling as doing a set downstairs. But I think it all starts with almost the aesthetics of the room.
Now, you got a guy coming up that would go and do multiple sets all night at clubs all over each city?
I mean, in LA, it was harder to do, especially when I was starting out. It was a lot of open mics, 5-10 minutes here and there. And you get to New York, and that's kind of, you could run around the city and do multiple sets. But I was lucky enough to get into the Comedy Cellar early. And so I would just do 2 or 3 sets a night at the Cellar. The Comedy Cellar was just a peaceful place for me to be. Whereas other comedy clubs, I'm just kind of in and out. The Cellar, you wanted to hang.
You had said that you used to be able to do the early sets so that you can be able to go home and go to work. Who did you talk to so that you were able to get in and get out? Because most bookers I know don't really care if you have another job.
No, the Cellar was good to me, that they liked me right away. And when I got the job writing on Jimmy Fallon, I'll never forget the Esty, the woman who books it, said, "That's too bad." I thought they'd be happy for me. He said, "That's too bad. You could have been a great comedian." I said, well, what do you mean? I'm just going to be writing. I can do both. And they're like, no one does that. You get the writing job. The hours are so crazy. Creatively, it's exhausting. You don't want to go out and do sets afterwards. And I said, well, I'm going to find a way to do this. I knew Dave Chappelle had writing jobs and still was a great stand-up. Colin Quinn was a great stand-up and had writing jobs. And so I went and asked them both. I said, how did you do this? How'd you do both? And they both gave me the exact same answer. They said it was easy. I was really bad at my job. Stand-up was more important to me than what I was doing at work, and I wasn't there. I didn't write that long, but I just kept doing stand-up. I thought, no, that's all I'll do. So I may have not been the most pleasant coworker at Jimmy Fallon because I was tired all the time, but I made sure that I kept that muscle moving.
Jimmy Fallon, Cameron Diaz had a show called Trippin' on MTV.
Yeah.
And she took me and Jimmy Fallon and Justin Timberlake to Tanzania, to the Serengeti Plain, where I like to say where they filmed The Lion King. And I lived in a tent with Jimmy Fallon. This was when he was working on Fever Pitch with Drew Barrymore was about to come out. He had left SNL and he hadn't gotten the Jimmy Fallon Show, and he was nervous and scared about where his career was going to go. And we drank a lot, and we learned a lot about each other. I really like Jimmy a lot, but your style of comedy is obviously very different than the safe spaces that he has to stay in.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine that was probably very difficult.
Very difficult. And I was hired before they even started that first show, before we moved to the Tonight Show. Mm-hmm. And so I think they had me on just in case, they needed me. But the show was such a hit right away, and people loved Jimmy that we just went with his sense of humor. And there's no place for my jokes in Jimmy's sense of humor. Great boss, but never told any of my jokes.
Right.
And he was right not to.
So let's talk about the joke police and what it was like dealing with standards and practicing with your writing.
Standards and practices always cracks me up because you would think it would be like actual laws, or actual rules that like, oh, you can't violate this. But there's such a gray area there that it really came down to like who you were dealing with that day.
Right.
And over my career, I found ways to work with them. If they say you absolutely can't tell a joke about, cats. We can't have a joke about cats on the show. I'm like, well, if you look back 3 weeks ago, there was a joke about cats on this show. That's all they need. They just need to be able to like not get yelled at if someone gets upset. So they're almost trying to cut off complaints before they come in.
Right.
And if you can say, this is how you handle that complaint, this is why that's okay, they'll let you do it 9 times out of 10. So it's pretty funny to have to deal with most of the time. And now at this point, they kind of leave me alone.
It's like legal precedent, right?
Exactly.
Dave Chappelle in one of the specials talks about standards and practices that he faced on the Chappelle Show, and the idea that he couldn't say the F word. He couldn't say faggot, and he would say nigger all the time. And I'm sure everybody remembers that joke in the special, but I found it interesting that you have this take on standards and practices, and he has this take on standards and practices. And I've heard you say how inspired you were by the skit from his show with the black white supremacist. I thought that was an interesting connection.
Yeah, I just love that he went for it right away. He drew that line in the sand and was like, you're either with me, you either accept this skit and we can move forward, or you're out and I don't need you to come back. Dana Carvey famously did that. He had a show called The Dana Carvey Show after he left SNL, and they tried the line in the sand thing and it backfired, where they had the Bill Clinton breastfeeding puppies, I think, and people tuned out and never came back, and that show got canceled.
Right.
But I like taking that chance anyway, saying this could be the end of the show, but I'm going to do it. I'm not going to save it for the last episode.
Right. Chappelle just hosted SNL again. I was blessed to be the musical guest, and like yourself, I grew up on SNL. I grew up watching it with my family, and so it was a big deal for me to do that show. And Dave, I felt like he did a great job with the monologue, but he was accused of being anti-Semitic because I guess he didn't go far enough for some people. You did an interview with the Daily Beast recently, with Matt Wilstein from the Daily Beast. And this is a guy who last week, he was the Daily Beast was one of the main people to say that Chappelle was being anti-Semitic in his routine. And I just wanted to get your take on what people perceive cancel culture to be, coming not just from right wing, but something as left and quote unquote progressive as a Daily Beast.
I think cancel culture is just kind of the cost of doing business. I think the term is overused at this point. No one's actually being canceled. It's more, consequence culture. But I think when you're someone like Chappelle who talks about things like that, you're going to get blowback, and that's just part of promotion almost. That I don't understand why people get so upset or so sensitive to it. That people, if you're as big as he is, people are going to get upset at things that you say.
No
but that's
what.
that's part of what you do, and that's part of why you do it. So I don't understand the complaint. Like when he said during his monologue that this culture now is making his job hard to do.
Right.
He makes so much money. Your job should be a little hard. Like I don't have sympathy for you in that, and I think he says whatever he wants to. Great, but I think when there's pushback, I don't understand why it bothers him.
Understood.
Oh, I get it.
Understood.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about. Well, before we talk about that, I want to say rest in peace to Greg Giraldo. He was such a brilliant comic. And can you talk about his legacy a little bit? Because I don't feel like he gets talked about enough.
No, you're absolutely right. I think he got tied to the roasts in a way, and he was like the best one for a lot of years. But was a great comic. I think it kind of gave him the short shrift for his reputation as a comedian. I think he would have really thrived if he'd want to live another 10 years and see this kind of Netflix boom and have more specials and not just be tied to Comedy Central.
Right.
But he was a brilliant guy. and he had no business being a comedian. He was such a smart guy.
Yeah,
he was a great lawyer before.
Was he a lawyer? I read a story where Jeff got in trouble doing some jokes, and he retained. Greg did his lawyer work for him.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great story.
And just an absolute a great human being. You know, I remember I wrote for a roast. I wrote for the roast of David Hasselhoff, and they asked me to do warm up, which is like you go out before the show starts and talk to the crowd and do stand up. It's a terrible gig, and especially in this situation. I remember Geraldo just making fun of me for having to do that before I walked out there. Right. And then the dais is on the stage when I have to go walk out and do this 5 minutes. And when I remember walking out and Geraldo stood up and gave me a standing ovation, like clapped and screamed for me, laughed at all my jokes. And I was like, this is such a nice thing for him to do. He doesn't have to be doing this. He's about to do his own set. Right. And that was the last time I saw him.
Man, that night. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jeff Ross. I mean, almost everything that I have accomplished in LA is like a direct tie to him. Also, one of the first writers' rooms I've got to shadow was Comedy Central Roast. Can you describe how you operate in the Comedy Central Roast writers' rooms and how the roast jokes are formed?
Yeah, the writing for the roast is almost more fun than actually doing them, because in the room you're just saying the meanest thing you can. You're trying to make the other people in the room laugh, and it's all bitter comedy writers, so it has to be extreme. So you write these amazing jokes, and it's like, all right, well, what can we get away with on TV? Those writers' rooms were so much fun and kind of informed how I was going to approach comedy. Right. I got tired of comics who would like make the joke and say, well, we can't do that. What if you just did it? Right. What if you weren't worried about it and you just did what was the funniest thing you could think of, regardless of anyone's feelings or any of that? And that was a fun way to live for 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I love Roast Battle because it is a Roast Battle that's in the Comedy Store. Didn't you do some judging for that for one of the
I've judged a few of those.
Yes, I thought so. So I love that because it's just a release, and like all the things that people are doing to you, all the times you can't respond back. And then when you're in Roast Battle, you can literally say the most off-the-wall things, and it's accepted on Tuesday night from 10 to 12. You can say it and then go on and follow the rules of the road.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Roast Battle is fun. I think it is ruining some comedians right now because not everyone should be roasting. No, not everyone should be going up and doing that. And I think a lot of young comics are thinking that's my way in. Yeah, and it's a road to ruin for some people. It was perfect for me, but not everyone should be doing that.
When you said that Greg got tied to the roast, that was really interesting to me because I feel like you were actively working against that. I feel like at some point in your career, it's like, okay, that's the roast guy. And it's like, no, I'm so much more than that. But before we move on from roast, I just want to ask about, you famously roasted Donald Trump. And I think in a lot of ways it put you on a map for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
But then Trump went on SNL, and like I said, you're somebody who grew up on Jack Handey and SNL, and I've heard you say that you were disgusted, which is an interesting choice of word, by Trump's SNL appearance. I had similar feelings. Can you break down what bothered you about it?
What bothered me, and it wasn't so much giving him a platform. I mean, he's a famous politician or famous person before that. What disgusted me was that they gave him editorial control. That he decided what jokes you had to tell. I remember that Weekend Update where they had to make jokes about his opponents in the Republican primary, and that disgusted me. You look at Michael Che's face when he's got to deliver these jokes, and he wants to be anywhere else. And I was like, oh, I feel for you, man. That's what upset me.
What do you think about Trump saying he's going to run again? Or do you have any thoughts about that? Or is that even important to you?
It's not. I wouldn't say it's important to me. I mean, I definitely see what's happening out there, but I truly believe that he's only doing it to try to avoid prosecution. And good luck with that. It seems like the party's turning against him, but I'm not a fan.
Okay. Now, one of my favorite jokes from you is a very, very simple joke. This joke is, I'm looking at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. When you say, I don't like racism. Thank you. Yeah. That's almost like a perfectly written joke.
Yeah.
And it speaks to people like me, who's like, I'm famous for always like calling out racist systems and structures and stuff. So that joke speaks to that in a very efficient way. But you also, and I don't know how much, and I want you to break it down. I don't know how much of the stuff that you say up in your life is true or not, because I've heard you also in your routine say, look, a lot of this stuff is not true. But you make jokes about your mother being a Holocaust denier. You make jokes about your grandmother, her racism. This joke you had about adopting being adopted and, you being adopted because you were a white baby. That's an amazing joke.
Thank you.
But then you got fan mail from white supremacists because of this joke. But I wanted you to talk to us about your experience of what you went through in your head when you're doing jokes, which in my opinion are smart jokes on race, but they're taken the wrong way by some aspects of society.
Yeah, I mean, I get it a lot where people, racist people will use a joke that's criticizing racism, but they'll say, well, that's, like, I think the second part of that joke you just brought up was, I don't understand racism. Why would you hate an entire group of people just because of the way they all behave?
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get that joke and like, oh, you're making fun of racism. Some people say that's how it is. That is, like, you're right about that. And I don't know how to be blunt and tell people, like, I think it's boring to be on stage and be talking about how morally correct you are. People call it clapter. You want the audience to be like, yes, you're not racist. And like, I don't need to do that during my
There's
hour
endorphins that come
stage.
with that too.
Exactly. And there's nothing funny about it. So I like to be a little challenging, leave a gray area. And I'm happy in interviews to give my true intentions, but you can't really change the way people are going to take a joke. You just hope that, you're staying true to yourself and not pandering to either group.
Now you speak out against cancel culture and even question its existence, and you are very, very, more than most, unapologetic about your performance. But you also, in a very mature way, have made decisions to stop doing certain jokes. And I feel like maybe it's not so much a maturity, but like, well, I did that already. Where else can I take that? And I find that very interesting that you sort of self-edit and self-police before cancel culture does it for you. Like, am I correct to say that it's not so much a maturity thing, but more of an artistic thing?
Yeah, I'd say that's true. And part of it's the way that Dave walked away from Chappelle Show because the way someone laughed. It was a specific laugh. If I feel the audience is laughing for the wrong reasons, that will make me sour on a joke. And again, some of the jokes that I've dropped, they're also very short jokes. I'm like, what am I actually losing if I get rid of this? It's not I'm not capitulating to anyone by dropping these jokes. It truly is a personal decision for me. But yeah, there's some laughs I get where I'm like, oh, that's wrong. They're laughing at the wrong part of that. Let me see how I can adjust this.
That process of seeing a comedian work up to their hour or work up to their special or just work just to make sure that they have the good 5 minutes or good 10 minutes. That's my favorite part of comedy. Seeing the mistakes, seeing the process.
That should be my favorite part of comedy, but it's the most uncomfortable part of comedy because that's when you know something's funny and it's funny. Cool. But when you go up there and you still have to have the same confidence as if you know it's funny and you don't know if it's funny yet.
But that's where I think the art is, right? The art is in the fear and in the being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember once I was in New York and I was writing on Jimmy Fallon and I wasn't writing stuff for myself. Anything I wrote for myself just wasn't working. So I thought, let's just go up and just start talking to the audience and see how it goes. And it was right after the Chris Brown Rihanna incident.
Oh, no.
And maybe like a week afterwards. And I go up and I'm in this show in Brooklyn and I just start talking about it. And the crowd is so uncomfortable. They're hating it. They're hating me. And I'm sweating. I'm just covered in sweat trying to get through this. And I'm like, I've got to get out of this. And I just came up with the punchline right there. And the joke killed. One of the biggest laughs I've ever gotten. And I was bummed about it because a month later, I've got to stop doing it because the joke is now old.
Right.
But I was like, that's how I came up with a great joke in the moment by putting myself through hell on stage live. But it was so painful that I've never tried to do it again. Like I hated it that much that it really is tough, but you can come up with great things through your own discomfort if you need to.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I was told to work on is to be able to sit in it because Ron Taylor, I don't know if you know him, he's a comedian, hilarious. But he's like a studier of comedy. And he was telling me that if they're silent, keep going. Because like if I'll be like working through something and the crowd will be silent and I'm like, all right, no, I'm just going to go to what I know is funny. And it's like, no, work through that silence. If they're not talking and they're not booing, they're listening.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all that matters.
Silence is okay. I'm fascinated by Chris Rock. When he's trying stuff out, he is so patient.
Yeah.
And has no problem taking the audience's time to just sit there and think of something. And I could not do that. I've got to have the joke, the punchline.
He's earned that, though.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
It's like,
But even when you earn it, you think that it becomes easier because you're a star. And Chris is one of the greatest stand-ups of all time. But I think that almost makes people have expectations. They're coming to see you. Like, they're going to tell the story of the time they saw Chris Rock dropping at the Comedy Store for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So that, to me, I'm like, okay, I have an obligation to this audience to give them a good story. And he's just totally unbothered by it. And I look up to that.
I think he's been in for so long. I was just watching I'ma Get You Sucker was on TV recently, right? And I just saw a young Chris with the Jerry curl doing the one rib thing. Yeah. And it just reminded me of how long he's been doing this. And it's like he was like a young star in Hollywood. That's how he even got that cameo, right? That means that when they made that movie in 83 or 84, whenever they made it, he was doing clubs, killing it. And so he has the confidence of knowing that, okay, it might bomb, I might fail in this setting. But he said that during the pandemic, he came to Yellow Springs and I saw him trying jokes, put on his glasses, and he pulled out his notebook and the papers were flying all around and he was trying bits and they weren't working. And he said, y'all gonna say a year from now that you saw me fail at this bit. Mm-hmm. And you're gonna be like, man, that joke has come a long way in a year. Yeah. And just him letting us in on that process was funny.
See, that's why I was so grateful that Dave Chappelle utilizes the Comedy Store, because all those late nights when he held us in comedy bliss till 3 a.m. and we got to sit there and watch him work out stuff. And then when we saw it on Netflix, I feel like for all the comedians that are newer and still grinding, like for us to be able to see that and then see the finished product on TV, we're like, okay, you're walking down the right path. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And he would be on the stage for hours just talking sometimes about things that didn't even sound like it was ever going to be a joke.
Louis C.K. had a great way to look at it. He said in an interview once, he said, people love to say, I went and saw George Carlin and he was great. Mm-hmm. But what they really love is to say, I saw George Carlin once and he was awful. Mm-hmm. Like seeing a legend like struggle is just as fun for the audience, I think, as watching them kill.
Yeah. That's entertainment, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So how big of a grind was it doing a weekly comedy show when you had the Jeselnik offensive? And if you go back, are there any things that you would do differently?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was such a grind. It is such a grind when you're doing a topical show, because I remember like the second week of our show, there was that story about the guy from South Africa, the Blade Runner guy, who had no legs and killed his girlfriend. Yeah, Pistorius.
Oh,
and that was, we sunk our teeth into that. That was like manna from heaven.
I remember seeing that in real time when you were doing that.
Yeah. We were so happy. And it's a fun show. And the next week we're like, all right, now what's in the news? Nothing. You know, I remember being on Jimmy Fallon and them saying like, all right, we need the jokes about Obama's new tax plan. I'm like, well, that's like, this is the worst thing you could have told me. But I understand why you need it. So being a slave to the news was tough on that show. And I think what I would do differently is I think I tried to do too much. It was my first TV show, and I wanted to kind of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to do skits as well as panel and kind of stand up and a monologue. And I wish I had just simplified and done just do the panel and a little monologue and just make that great instead of getting out of my comfort zone, if you will, trying to act on my own show. Like my last TV show, Good Talk, was just an interview like this. Very simple, you know, a bunch of jokes and just two people. And that was much more fun, much more manageable, and much more enjoyable.
Well, you were ambitious, you know, and TV, Comedy Central, you know, you're trying to like swing for the fences at that point, right?
Yeah, I was afraid I would be successful on a show I didn't want to do. I would rather fail doing what I wanted, and I think I just tried to do too much.
You know, it's kind of like when it's open bar, your first open bar, and you go in there and you drink all the drinks. It's like, give me everything, and then you're drunk. That's kind of...
Oh, your first 100 open bars. Yeah.
Now, we just had Tony Baker on the show and Ida Rodriguez. And Last Comic Standing is not a show that I watched when it was on, but so many comics who are working now came through that show. You hosted it, and you once tweeted, I am proud of my entire career, but single-handedly killing Last Comic Standing is what I want to be remembered for.
Yeah.
Can you explain that tweet and break it down?
Yeah, I mean, Last Comic Standing was just a show that when I started out, I think Last Comic Standing started maybe a few months after I got into stand-up comedy. One of maybe my second or third time on stage was auditioning for Last Comic Standing, season 1 or 2. And so people, when I was starting out, people would always say, oh, you should be on Last Comic Standing. So that was in the back of my mind. But by the time they offered me the hosting job, I wanted nothing to do with it. But Norm Macdonald was a judge, and I worship Norm Macdonald.
Yeah.
Had never gotten to meet him or work with him, and I thought I'll do it just for this. And the show kind of wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I think as sometimes reality shows protect the performer too much. It was a show where they tried to get rid of all the drama. If a comic bombed and the judges made fun of them bombing, that was way more interesting than what we got. And if someone bombed, they ended up just cutting all of it. So it was pretty annoying to watch the edit of that show and see what they took out. Norm and I fighting about something. I thought was that this will be interesting TV, and they took it out. They said, I remember that they told me, they go, Anthony, don't worry, we edited the episodes and we took out anything that made you look like an asshole. And I was like, I wanted that stuff.
You're like, say hello to the bad guy. Yeah. I'm the fucking villain.
I came here to be an asshole. That's what I thought was like the funny thing about me doing Last Comic Standing, and they took it all out. So I was very happy when that show completely went away. Like, you can't even find it on streaming. They have every season of Last Comic Standing except mine, and I'm very happy about that.
That's hilarious because Comedy Central loves to show bombings.
Oh, yeah.
So you mean to tell me that reality TV doesn't convey reality?
I mean, that's obvious, but usually they go for they're trying to manufacture drama,
right?
And on Last Comic Standing, they got rid of any kind of drama, anything that would have been interesting for the viewer.
Now let's talk about thoughts and prayers for a second. My thoughts and prayers are with the victims. Thoughts and prayers is a very bold name for a special if you're an atheist, I think. And when you say one of the greatest jokes I've heard in recent memory, and it's not even a joke, but when you say that the true meaning of thoughts and prayers is don't forget about me today. Because that's exactly that's perfect. That's exactly what the fuck it is. Where does the beginning of your criticism of organized religion start?
I don't really have a criticism of organized religion so much. Like, and I used to say I was an atheist. And part of that, I think, comes from being raised Catholic and made to go to church. Like, it was important that I just kind of showed up and checked that box every Sunday. And that bothered me. So as soon as I could get away, I did. But now I refer to myself as an apatheist, where I don't care if there's a God. I respect all religions, but I just leave me out of it. I'm not interested in the discussion even. But when I talked about thoughts and prayers, I meant specifically the phrase thoughts and prayers on social media. People say to me, well, actually prayer can have a difference. If you want to pray, go ahead and pray. I'm not criticizing that. I'm not saying prayer does nothing. I'm saying thoughts and prayers does nothing. I don't mean going on and saying, I remember Norm Macdonald and he was a great man. That's okay. If that helps you get through a death or a tragedy, go for it. But saying thoughts and prayers, which became like a template, was what I was criticizing. It was just that thoughtless rubber stamp sentiment people were putting out there.
And what you just said about atheism is crazy to me because, look, some of the smartest people in the world that I know are atheists. I think it's like, to become someone who's an atheist and then even go to agnostic or apathy, what you just said, you have to be thinking about things. You have to be a thinker. Not a free thinker, but an actual thinker, right? And but there's people, I think maybe Bill Maher is probably the most famous example of this. And while I have a lot of respect for Bill Maher as a commentator and a TV host and a comedian, he's a classic, I feel like sometimes people who follow him and follow known atheists can be dogmatic in their atheism. And I hear you pushing back against that. Was that your intention?
Yeah, it can be obnoxious and dismissive, and I don't feel the need to do that. A lot of atheists are like, "You're stupid if you believe in God."
Right.
I don't like saying that.
Right. I agree. I completely agree.
Everyone should just keep their own thoughts to themselves and stop trying to push their beliefs onto other people. And I feel like if we do that, then it shouldn't matter what anyone is.
I agree. Now, this other special, you had Fire in the Maternity Ward. You like that special?
Oh my God. I literally, the whole time, I was just like, love it. Masterpiece.
What I like the most about Fire in the Maternity Ward is what Jasmin just said about silence, is that now you're established in your career, you've done this a bunch of time, and now you're like really mastering your craft and your style. And I feel like in this special more than the others, you really lean into the silence. There's moments in that special where you're doing a joke and we're anxiously waiting for the punchline because we know it's like one of these Jeselnik moments is coming and you can hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
Like it's dead
People
quiet.
are afraid to laugh.
But that's part of it, right?
Oh, it's building up the tension. I mean, everything I do on stage is to build that tension as much as you can before you release it, and it's the biggest laugh. So especially if you're talking about something dark and you're like, I need you to finish this sentence so I can get this out of my head. I love that. I think my last special is my best one. I think Fire in the Maternity Ward is the best I've ever done.
Yeah, I think it was absolutely hilarious.
I
That
agree.
slave joke,
I agree.
And my brother.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we just had babies too, so dropping the babies and scooping them up. I was just thinking to myself, nobody better not be dropping my baby and not telling me, because I'm going to be pissed.
That happens. That happens. People's babies get dropped.
All the time.
To circle back to the Jeselnik offensive, which I heard was once going to be called the Jeselnik Inquisition. I'm glad you went with offensive.
Yeah.
The Shark Party sketch, New Zealand was very upset at you about this. But I feel like in hearing you talk about it, you approached it from your love of animals. And you love sharks. I love sharks too. They're my favorite animal.
Yeah, me too.
What?
Sharks are my favorite animal. Sharks
What
are
the
amazing.
hell kind of person are you?
Sharks are like the human beings of the sea, but better. Like
Sharks are killers. They're murderers.
Like I said, the human beings of the sea, but better because they kill to eat. We just kill for whatever.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
But think about like hippos kill way more people every year than sharks do in 10 years.
But then you have hungry hippos. There's no cute shark game.
Baby shark is pretty cute.
It's true.
Okay, that is true. Yeah.
I did it off beat, like, so I didn't get sued. Did you really have a turtle growing up?
No.
That was just a joke.
Yeah.
When I heard that joke, I was like, yes, I had a turtle growing up. I did. When I was in high school, I had a turtle, and I wanted to go to the How Can I Be Down music convention in New Orleans. But if I left, there would be nobody to take care of my turtle.
What?
And I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision. Do I stay in Brooklyn and feed this turtle? And I had to buy goldfish and feed my turtle
murdered
goldfish.
the turtle?
No, I took him to the park and set him free.
No.
And then went to the music convention. And that was the day that I became a man.
Wow.
Talib, the turtle did not live in the park. You
This
killed
was
that
Prospect
turtle.
Park in Brooklyn. There was a lake.
You dropped your kid off and abandoned it. That's what made you a man? I don't know what's going on.
It was either be a rapper or be a
Or
turtle
raise
owner.
your turtle.
I don't know. I think you made the wrong call. I think if you had been smarter about it, you would have just gone to the festival and let the turtle starve to death.
Either way, the turtle's dead.
That was very villainous, Anthony.
All right, let's talk about your podcast with Rosenthal, Vanity Project. What makes your evolving relationship so adorable?
I think people, Greg Rosenthal and I have been best friends since college. We met in New Orleans freshman year, and I think people just I don't seem like the kind of guy who has a lot of friends, and I really don't. So to see a friendship that's like a best friendship, and we respect each other and have been through a lot together. I think people enjoy seeing that side of me, and it's really the only way I would even want to do a podcast is with my best friend. I don't like having guests. I don't want to do what you're doing right now, but yeah, I think people seem to really respond to that exploration of male friendship.
Yeah, we love a good bromance.
How many episodes are y'all in?
Our next episode will be 183.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Can you give us insight to your writing process?
As a stand-up or
no, for your podcast, is all just off the cuff?
Pretty much. I mean, they give me a bunch of different stories that week. I pick the ones I think are going to be funny. Pick a couple emails to read, and just talk about kind of what happened that week. Maybe we'll tell some stories, but it just evolves, and it's just us getting to hang out. It really is the only time. He's got kids now. He's married. He's got work, that we get to hang out and talk for 2 hours every week, and that benefits both of us.
Do you feel like the podcast has strengthened your friendship?
Yes.
It's
monetized.
It's monetized. And that's strength, right?
Yeah.
Word up.
Yeah.
And so was your friend a comedian on his own, or you just was like, hey?
Oh, he's not a comedian. I mean, we were both funny. We were the funny ones in college, and then he got serious. He's a football writer for the NFL, but he also has his own podcast, so he could bring something to the table and be professional. I didn't feel like I was kind of just having a friend there as a prop, but we bounce off each other well.
What is next for Anthony Jeselnik?
Next, I've just been on the road. My last month, it's November. Last month, it was my 20-year anniversary in stand-up comedy.
Congratulations!
Congrats! Yeah.
Thank you. And
word up. You are a 20-year-old, as Seinfeld would say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And after I put out Fire in the Maternity Ward, and I was working on the new hour, and COVID came along and messed up my normal process. And this is my 5th hour I'm working on now, so it's become more difficult, which has been interesting to me. But because of the 20th anniversary, I just kind of went out on the road a little bit earlier than I would have. And over the past 7 weeks, I just finished up a 7-week run a couple days ago. I saw the act evolve a lot. I went out with half an hour, and now I've got 45 minutes. So I'm going to go back out on the road in January through May, just comedy clubs. And hopefully by the end of that, I'll have the hour kind of where I want it. And then I go into theaters. And for like a year, maybe 2 years, I'll do theaters in America and then internationally. And then Australia and tape a special, hopefully. I think the second comedy boom has ended. I think it ended with the pandemic and was on its way out before that. Netflix kind of ruined the market a little bit. That I don't know what it's going to look like in 2 years when I'm ready to tape a special, but I hope it's just as good as it can be when I finally put it on.
And that's what I noticed, because your specials are more spaced out. It's not just like, let me just throw. Like, you take your time and give good quality product.
Well, the new thing, I think, with comics, I have good friends who do this, and it's so smart, where they say, okay, Netflix special is coming out Tuesday, tour starts Wednesday.
Yeah.
So they tape it, and then they have a whole hour ready to go, and they make all that money because you're fresh in everyone's mind. I say, new special on Tuesday, I'll see you in 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to be around town working on that, and it's the way I have to do it. But I'm jealous. I'm jealous of their low bars.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored and proud to have Anthony Jeselnik on the People's Party. Thank you for coming and sitting with us.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.